all before, this is a reschedule from December. So hopefully my guest will be able to come on because she's the founder of Teach My Kid to Read, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on literacy and getting the librarians on board. Okay, so hi everyone, thanks for joining. There we go. Hi Marian.
Hi, how are you?
Fine. All right, well, let's get started with this conversation. So those of you who were here and a month ago when we were trying to get this conversation started, I was telling a little bit about what Teach My Kid to Read is. So instead of me doing it, obviously I want you to do it. So we are going to frame this conversation in 3 major questions so everyone knows where we're going. And so the first one is basically what inspired you to create Teach My Kid to Read? What are the benefits and the mission of Teach My Kid to Read? And where can people find you and support this nonprofit? So yes, Marian, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and the organization.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm so glad to be here. And, you know, it's so amazing with these live events. And usually I'm the host of them. And now I kind of see what it's like from the other side. But I think that now that we actually got on, I feel relaxed and excited.
Good.
This was the biggest hurdle. But to get back to your initial question about what the inspiration for Teach My Kid to Read was and why I founded this organization, I'll give you a little bit of history about myself. I'm from educational publishing, and my whole background is in education, either in publishing or teaching a little bit in higher education. And like so many teachers or anybody in the education world, I just took it for granted that when my daughter started school, she would learn to read. And I also thought that was something I had my arms around as somebody in publishing and in the learning field. I just had no idea that there was this whole world of so many kids who struggled to read. And, you know, because we have a short period of time, to make a long story short, I went through the same trajectory that probably, you know, every parent that has a child that doesn't learn to read typically goes through. And where I landed was at a school for kids with reading disabilities, with language disabilities, called Camp Dunneback at the Kildonan School.
Oh, yes,
And for me, we landed there one summer, and I can't remember how old my daughter was at the time, maybe going into 5th or 6th grade, but it was just such an outrageous scenario that we received so much support and excitement from the school community, and we found this place, and it cost a fortune, but it was just this utopia that we were going to go to learn to read. And so it was a very pivotal summer for me in terms of my publishing work that I was doing so that kids all over the world could learn intro to psychology and become educated. But I still couldn't get my arms around why my own daughter and so many children weren't learning to read. I was just starting to understand that there was a whole other realm. And so I started writing about it that very unusual summer that I went with my daughter to Camp Dunneback. We rented this little cabin, and I always say in the middle of nowhere. And I wrote this 6-page letter to everybody I knew, including the school principal, administrators that summer. And so I just want to read a paragraph from it because I think it exemplifies a bit of a lot of our worlds and what inspired me to found Teach My Kid to Read. So
Marian, before you read that, I want to kind of give the audience a little bit of background. So the Kildonan School is associated with the word Gillingham, and that's in upstate New York. So those people who are not aware, Teach My Kid to Read is based out of New York. And, you know, I am certified through the Orton Gillingham Academy, and there are a lot of Orton Gillingham classically trained teachers who work at the Kildonan School. So I just wanted people to understand that context, to know, like, you brought your daughter to one of the top tier dyslexia schools in the country, that teachers knew exactly what to do to know how to help her.
Yes, absolutely. And that's great context. So anyway, here we go. there we were, a bunch of parents dropped together in the middle of a rural part of northern Dutchess County, which is in New York, trying to figure it all out. There was a woman from Australia who couldn't get services there and wanted her son to be around, quote unquote, regular kids with dyslexia. There was a woman from Tampa and her son who became our roommate for a few weeks, who essentially got accepted to Camp Dunnebeck, packed it all up, and needed to figure out where to stay for a couple of weeks. There was a woman and her young son camping nearby while her husband stayed home with their daughter. The stories go on, especially for us newbies, but there we stood, truly on a hill overlooking the pristine Hudson Valley, Berkshire countryside, just hoping we had found the place that could teach our kids to read and give them a summer. And that was really that was the inspiration for Teach My Kid to Read, because I really was amazed that there were so many people at this place, kind of in the middle of nowhere. And it truly is, it's like in the corner of Connecticut and Massachusetts, and in New York there's really nothing around it. And so when people have to camp to stay there, sometimes it's not because they like camping, there's really no place to stay. So I was just, I mean, my head was spinning, like, what am I doing here? And how did this just happen in 6 weeks? Because as it turned out, my daughter did learn to read, and so many of the kids improved. And I just felt that my own experience in educational publishing and, even in the corporate world, that somehow or another I needed to expand this 6-page letter and these blog posts we were starting to write and be part of some solution. And initially, because my background is more in post-secondary and higher education, I've worked a lot in the vocational areas, the career areas, and definitely in higher education. And I felt very comfortable, but that once I explained to my friends, the authors, all my world in higher education, what was going on, that we would affect change, that as if we were interested, if I was going to start to plant the seeds to start an organization, it would be to affect change in higher education. Because once these instructors realized that teachers weren't necessarily always being trained in the ways that help the most amount of kids learn to read, well, of course they would change the curricula and they would start to train teachers. And so I was very, very, very naive about that world. And thankfully the higher education or colleagues that I had, they were sympathetic, but they were not necessarily in the College of Education, or they were not in that world. And so I got slammed pretty hard when I started having conversations with people in education, and then getting to know the literacy leaders, in the world, not in the country, but just getting to know literacy leaders and really realizing that there's decades of history beyond having a conversation with an instructor, that a lot of kids aren't learning to read, and that this was a long haul, that this was not necessarily a strategy that we were going to be able to easily create any type of change in. So
So I think, like, hearing that story, and because I didn't know that story, which I love to use lives as like a live conversation, and it really makes sense. So those of you who don't know, I think I put this in my story prior too, but I'm a board member and Teach My Kid to Read. And so, I see and hear your passion in the meetings and in the emails. And so it's just really lovely to hear the story behind it. And so I'm really excited for you to share with our audience, what is the mission and what is it that Teach My Kid to Read does for the community?
So anyway, what we did is, once the organization formed, and where we are now is that Teach My Kid to Read is really focused on empowering parents, caregivers, and guardians with the tools to help all kids with dyslexia learn to read. And when we say the tools, understanding the strategies, approaches, and access to the resources. And we work primarily primarily through libraries, because we believe in order to create widespread systematic change, that we want to work with systems. We want to work with individuals that have the greatest effect on helping kids learn to read. And so back in 2019, our first program was to do a little test with libraries, and that test came about for a couple of reasons. One, our legislators here in New York, how come libraries, pediatricians, why aren't we connecting the dots more in literacy? And over the years, having conversations with parents, myself included, once our kids got the help they needed, there's certain types of books called decodable books. That support structured literacy, that focus on practice with the phonics skills, that help kids learn to read. And why weren't our libraries stocking them? Why don't bookstores know about them? So anyway, we did an experiment in New York, and in 2019 we went out and we just started talking to public librarians. And for Dyslexia Awareness Month, would you create awareness and learn about these books called Decodable? And they're part of the science of reading. And we tried to explain as quickly as we could. We didn't have a formal program then. We tried to explain that, learning to read is, it's two roads. It's rich language, and not limiting kids to level textbooks, but letting them read whatever they want and giving them access to books that look like their world and their community, but then also teaching them to read the words, and that requires teaching. And so anyway, in short, that program was a success. It was 2019. Libraries got excited, and we started formalizing the way that we were presenting to libraries, and more people heard about us. Other states got involved, and so we had planned to expand greatly in New York, but then what happened was COVID hit, and so we decided that all of our initiatives we would put online. And so any library that's interested in getting just baseline information about how we read in decodable books could have access our materials online and start to learn a little bit about how we read and what these books are and stock them. And so that's how our program evolved. And our mission is definitely to empower librarians so they can educate parents and help more kids learn to read. But we also have a lot of information for parents on our website. We go through the stages of how we read, what it means, examples. We have free ebooks, because I think one of the, there's a lot of alphabet soup, and there's really a long learning process in this world. I always say we're not all literacy specialists, and even when we start taking courses to get better informed, it's a long process to really understand all the components of learning to read, how it all fits together. But really, anybody can start to help. And that's why, we have what's known as the ICSAM ebooks on our website, so that, if parents have some information about the instructional component of learning to read and focusing on phonological awareness, the sounds and what that looks like, they have some books right on our website they can practice, or they can see the list of decodable books. But we really want parents to feel like, we're a resource, but primarily we want libraries, we want school libraries, we want public libraries, we want anybody walking in and saying, hey, my kid is 3 or 4, how can they learn to read? Or the teacher said they should read these types of books. We want, a lot of the librarians we work with now, what I love, and a lot of librarians just do it anyway, they're like, don't, let the kids read what interests them. And
definitely.
And they're passionate about that, but they also understand decodable books. And for anybody listening that doesn't know what they are books that enable kids to practice the phonics skills they're learning from a very basic, simple way all the way to more complex.
Right.
And once they're taught these very basic phonics skills, they can practice them. They can practice them in these books until they learn to read fluently with automaticity. These are temporary books, and so for librarians to be able to say to parents, not to be able to, young kids when they're learning to read, rather than you're shuffling them to level textbooks, to be able to say, let them read whatever they want, and here's some books that if you want to practice a little bit with them or find out how the school and what they're being taught in school, where they are in their reading, these are books that are going to teach them to read the words. Because so many of us know that as parents and even teachers, we just we bumble around a bit, especially when our kids are struggling and we're trying to find books or find ways to help them. And we know that at least at a very basic level, whether it's carrying the resources, that anybody can at least get a child to read, get them off to read on the right foot. Obviously, some kids are going to need more help, and that's where people they're going to need a Dr. Lauren, but at least to start off on the right foot. I mean, certainly libraries can be resources. And so, for with our organization too, so we have a program, we have a membership program. Really any library in the world can sign up, and we have libraries in South Africa now, in Australia.
Great.
And we provide a lot of information, videos. And the other thing we've done is it's hard for libraries to access sometimes these decodable books. So they get discounts by working with us, because a lot of the publishers feel like before they even purchase the books, they want to be sure that they know what they are and how they're used and how they can explain them to parents. So any library, school librarian, public library, sign up for our program. They'll get some information. And
so I think when you focused on the librarian piece, I know for me, when I joined the board, that was a big aha moment for me, where being a special educator, I never really thought about librarians, knowing that is an integral piece where kids at a young age who have a love for reading, they want to go to the library, they want to go to the media center, they want to check out their books. And it is really critical for parents to know librarians do understand struggling readers and what they might need. And also the pediatricians, that's a huge thing too, where I know more than often. I was actually talking to a mom yesterday, and she was very frustrated with the school system. And she's like, my child was diagnosed with this and it wasn't dyslexia. And she's like, I think my child has dyslexia, but then I don't, the school won't test her until she's in this grade, and now she's in this grade, but then they're saying this, and then she's trying to go to the pediatrician. The pediatrician's like, talk to your school. So there's all of these different components that I do feel like Teach My Kid to Read offers for parents to feel empowered, for librarians to feel like, hey, don't worry, I may not be the learning specialist or, the dyslexia specialist, but I can at least direct you to these decodable books that might be appropriate, or to this specialist who might be Orton Gillingham trained to know what to do. Because bottom line is it's a community. So Marian, we are coming to the end of our interview, and I know that there are a few folks that are joining, but please feel free, if you are just joining, rewatch this later, share with others. This will be on my YouTube channel, and it will also be in my app. So for those of you who don't know and not aware, I'm going to say this every Saturday. So I have a Think Dyslexia app, and I put all of these episodes, Debrief, in the app, so you can access them while you're driving, cooking, folding laundry, whatever it is. Put your headphones in, you can listen, you can watch. So it's accessible there, and my app has a community as well. So that's why I want to get everyone on that, so we can engage and be a community. So before we hop off, how can the public support Teach My Kid to Read? Well, I know that you talked about the website and the programs, but is there anything where they can donate money? Is there anything? Tell us a little bit more about how they can reach you and how they can support Teach My Kid to Read.
Absolutely. A couple of things. One, oh gosh, can we use donations? So you could go to our website. We have
donate.
Yes, and yes, thank you. You've been generous, but we have donations help enormously. They help us serve libraries. They help us provide better information that the librarians could provide parents. So, please donate. A slight tangent. We need a board leader.
Yes.
We are looking for an individual with an extensive nonprofit experience. They don't have to be a literacy expert, but they have to certainly be in our world of literacy. But if anybody knows a nonprofit leader who would feel passionate about us, please contact us. It's an easy email, info@teachmykidtoread.org. So that is probably our biggest issue right now, is getting a great board leader in place for the wonderful board we have. Too, you can go to you can certainly go to our website to find information, teachmykidtoread.org. Also, we have an amazing Facebook group that we have a Facebook page, Teach My Kid to Read, and then we have a Facebook group. It's called Let's Talk Decodable Books and Literacy Resources, and it's for parents, it's for publishers, it's for librarians, educators, anyone interested in learning more about resources, how they work. And we started this after a presentation in Saratoga Springs, New York, to a library system. And now there's probably more educators than librarians, although we're always trying to get that balance. But we've got 10,600 members, and we are a learning community. And we also, try to, occasionally we have events where we provide discounts on some of the books. But it's a really, and you can be at rock bottom on the learning curve where you've never even heard of what these books are, how to help kids learn to read, or you can be an absolute, expert and contribute. So please join us in that group.
That's awesome, Marian. I didn't know about the Facebook group. So I will say that if you're listening to this live, obviously you're listening to this live, but I have an awesome videographer, which I think he joined in, and he does a great job kind of putting information underneath of when we're talking about it. So I know that if you were listening to this later, that information's there. And in the show notes for YouTube, I'll try to, Marian, if you can send that to me, I will kind of get that linked in for the show notes for YouTube, so people can just click stuff and access these groups and donate money.
Yes.
Well, thank you so much, Marian. I think this was an excellent conversation. I really feel like you gave our audience a really good, a quick synopsis, but a good, solid, comprehensive understanding of what Teach My Kid to Read is. So please support Teach My Kid to Read, and also looking for a board member. So if anybody knows anybody, definitely contact Marian. And I'm always looking to as well, because I know that's something we've talked about at meetings.
Yes.
But I want to say thank you so much for your time, and thank you everyone for joining in. And please don't hesitate to reach out with any questions. And I'll see you guys next Saturday for episode, I think this will be episode 9, because this is episode 5 rescheduled. So next week will be episode 9. So thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.